Ambassador Kethral of the Vendari Collective had been stationed on Earth for 3 standard cycles. In that time, she had witnessed humans argue about road construction for 16 months. She had seen a simple trade agreement pass through 7 different committees. She had watched elected officials publicly insult each other on broadcast networks, then vote against their own proposals simply because someone they disliked had supported them. She was losing her mind. The report on her desk contained her latest observations, carefully documented for the Collective Strategic Intelligence Division. Every word she wrote felt like admitting defeat. The humans were not just disorganized. They had built their entire civilization around being disorganized. And somehow, impossibly, they were thriving. Catherall pressed her clawed hand against the communication panel and began her transmission to High Command. This is Ambassador Catherall. Priority diplomatic cable. Classification level. Urgent. After extensive study of human governmental systems, I must report findings that challenge everything we believed about effective civilization management. She paused, gathering her thoughts. How could she explain this to the Council? They would think she had gone mad. The humans call their system democracy, but that word does not capture what they have created. They have developed something far more strange. They have built governments designed to fight against themselves. They call this checks and balances. They call it separation of powers. They call it federalism. What it actually means is that no single person or group can make anything happen quickly. On the Vendari homeworld, the collective operated with perfect efficiency. One voice commanded. All others obeyed. Decisions happened in moments. Implementation followed immediately. This was the natural order of things. Every successful species in the known galaxy had discovered this truth. Centralized control meant rapid response. Rapid response meant survival. But the humans had rejected this wisdom entirely. Their executive leaders cannot make laws, Catherall continued. Their lawmakers cannot enforce laws. Their courts can strike down any law they choose. Their central government must negotiate with smaller regional governments. Their regional governments must negotiate with even smaller local governments. Every level of authority exists specifically to limit every other level of authority. She had spent weeks trying to understand why. The answer, when she finally found it, had kept her awake for 3 nights. They did this on purpose. The words hung in the air of her office. She imagined the council members receiving this message, their confusion matching what she had felt when she first understood. The humans are not incompetent. They are not primitive. They built inefficiency into their systems intentionally because they fear efficiency. They fear it more than they fear external enemies, more than they fear economic collapse, more than they fear anything else in the universe. Catherall stood and walked to her window. Outside, the human city stretched toward the horizon. Millions of individuals going about their chaotic lives, making their own choices, answering to dozens of different authorities that constantly argued with each other. I have studied their history, she said. They've experienced what happens when power becomes concentrated. They have names for it. Tyranny, dictatorship, totalitarianism. These words carry weight in their languages that we cannot fully translate. They speak of leaders who achieved perfect efficiency, who eliminated opposition, who made their governments run like single organisms. And they speak of the horrors that followed. The humans had learned lessons that the Vendari had never needed to learn. They had discovered that efficient power could become efficient evil, that a government capable of doing great good quickly was also capable of doing great harm quickly, that the same structures that allowed rapid progress also allowed rapid destruction. Their solution was elegant in its madness. They deliberately crippled their own governments. They built systems where progress requires consensus, where change happens slowly, where no single failure point can bring down the whole structure. They accepted inefficiency as the price of safety. Catherall returned to her desk and pulled up the data she had compiled. The numbers still amazed her. even after reviewing them dozens of times. The results speak for themselves. In the past 300 years, humans have experienced 0 successful government takeovers by single individuals or factions. They have maintained continuous civilian governance despite multiple global conflicts. They have transferred power peacefully thousands of times across hundreds of nations. No other species in our records has achieved this level of political stability. She thought about the Vendari's own history. The collective had risen from the ashes of the 5th dynasty, which had collapsed when Emperor Vethanar went mad. Before that, the 4th dynasty had ended when the ruling family was assassinated. The 3rd dynasty had destroyed itself in civil war. Every transition of power in Vendari history had involved violence, chaos, and death. The humans had found another way. There is more, Kethral said. Their inefficiency provides unexpected military advantages. I have consulted with our tactical analysts, and they are deeply concerned. The Vendari military doctrine relied on decisive strikes against enemy command structures. Remove the head, and the body dies. This strategy had conquered 17 species and brought them under the collective's control. It was simple, efficient, and effective. Against the humans, it would fail completely. Human governments have no single head to remove. If we destroyed their primary executive, authority would transfer to secondary executives. If we destroyed those, it would transfer to legislative leaders. If we destroyed them, regional authorities would assume control. If we destroyed regional authorities, local authorities would continue functioning. The humans have built redundancy into their power structures that makes decapitation strikes meaningless. Kethriel pulled up military projections that her analysts had prepared. The numbers were sobering. Our models suggest that conquering Earth would require eliminating approximately 47 million individual decision-makers across governmental, military, economic, and social institutions. Even then, the remaining population would likely form new governance structures within days. The humans have made their civilization functionally unconquerable through standard military means. She remembered her first meeting with the human ambassador, a cheerful woman named Sarah Chen. Kethriel had asked about Earth's governmental structure, expecting to identify the true power holders behind the public figures. Ambassador Chen had laughed and explained that there were no hidden power holders. The public confusion was the reality. The humans do not hide their vulnerabilities, Kethriel said. They simply have no vulnerabilities to hide. What looks like weakness is actually strength. What looks like chaos is actually resilience. They have achieved through deliberate disorder what we have failed to achieve through perfect order. She thought about the implications for the collective's expansion plans. The Strategic Council had been considering Earth as a potential conquest target. The humans had valuable territory, advanced technology, and useful labor resources. On paper, they seemed like an attractive addition to the collective. I must advise against any military action regarding Earth, not because the humans are powerful in traditional terms. Their military technology is roughly equivalent to our own. Their population is smaller than several species we have conquered. On traditional metrics, they appear vulnerable. Kethriel paused, choosing her next words carefully. But the humans cannot be conquered because they have made themselves unconquerable. Their governmental inefficiency means that destroying their leadership accomplishes nothing. Their political fragmentation means that negotiating surrender is impossible because no one has authority to surrender on behalf of everyone. Their cultural acceptance of chaos means that occupying their territory would face constant resistance from millions of independent actors following no central command. She had discussed this with human military historians. They had told her about something called guerrilla warfare. They had explained how small, decentralized resistance movements had defeated larger, more organized forces throughout human history. They had described how the same inefficiency that frustrated their own governments also frustrated anyone trying to control them from outside. The humans have weaponized their own disorganization. Cathrall concluded. They have turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. And they did it intentionally, thousands of years ago, without knowing they would one day face threats from beyond their world. She saved her report and prepared to transmit it. But she had one more observation to add. I recommend that the collective study human governmental models for potential adoption. Our own system has vulnerabilities that we have never addressed. If the Emperor were assassinated tomorrow, the succession crisis could destroy everything we have built. The humans would never face such a risk because they have distributed power so widely that no single death could disrupt their civilization. Cathrall knew this recommendation would be controversial. The collective had thrived under centralized control for thousands of years. Suggesting change would anger many powerful individuals who benefited from the current system. But she had seen something on Earth that she could not unsee. She had watched humans complain about their governments constantly, then fight to protect those same governments from anyone who threatened them. She had seen them accept inconvenience and frustration as the price of freedom. She had witnessed their strange, chaotic, magnificent civilization stumble forward through endless arguments and compromises. And she had realized that the Vendari collective, for all its efficiency, was fragile in ways that human civilization was not. The humans have a saying, Cathrall added. They say that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. I did not understand this statement when I first heard it. I thought it was self-deprecating humor. Now I understand that it is a profound truth. She transmitted her report and leaned back in her chair. Outside her window, the human city continued its chaotic existence. Traffic moved in seemingly random patterns. Construction projects started and stopped based on budget negotiations. Politicians gave speeches criticizing each other while somehow still working together. It was messy. It was slow. It was frustrating to watch. And it was, Cathrall now understood, the most brilliant political innovation in the known galaxy. The humans had looked at the universe and decided that they feared their own power more than they feared anyone else's. They had chained themselves, limited themselves, deliberately handicapped themselves, all to ensure that no one among them could ever gain too much control. In doing so, they had become something no other species had ever managed to become. They had become free. Cathrall closed her eyes and wondered what the collective might look like if it ever found the courage to be that afraid of its own strength. She suspected she would never find out. The Vendari had never learned to fear power. They had only learned to fear those who held it. The humans were different. The humans feared power itself. And that fear had made them stronger than anyone had ever imagined. A report would cause chaos in the collective's halls of power. Officials would argue about it for months. Committees would form to study its implications. Some would dismiss it entirely, while others would demand immediate action. In other words, Cathrall thought with a slight smile, the collective would respond exactly the way the humans would have. Perhaps they had already learned something